Hello friends, we have come to the 10th week of our course on poetry. Today we deal with contemporary British poetry. Actually, we give an introduction to contemporary British poetry in this lecture, and then we will move on to 3 other poets we have selected for this particular week program. English poetry in the late 20th and early 21st century is what we are going to see. When we look at this 20th and 21st century British poetry, we find a variety of writers from different regions. British, that is the mainland, Scottish, one province of United Kingdom, another Welsh, that is Wales, one more province of United Kingdom. Then we have Irish group from Northern Ireland, and then more importantly we have poets from various ethnic groups. So, we have ethnic poetry as well, immigrant poetry as well. Then when we look at the history of post 1950 British poetry, we see several groupings based on these various geographical locations and different identities like ethnic or feminist. So, we can say we have movement poets represented by Larkin, Enright and Jennings. We also have Alvarez group of poets represented by Tom Gunn, Ted Hughes and Geoffrey Hill. We have one more group poets headed by Hobsbaum, represented by Redgrove and Brown Johnson. We have a very popular group of poets called Liverpool Poets, Robert McGough, Brian Patten and Adrian Henry. They popularized poetry like no other people did in the past. Then we have Scottish Makars. They have a different name for poets called Makars because Makars means makers. They do not want to use that word poet. We have some examples in Edwin Morgan and Douglas Dunn. Then we have Irish poets primarily from Northern Ireland represented by Seamus Heaney, Paul Muldoon and Michael Longley. Then we have a large number of poets under this category. Women poets, just we have some 3 examples here: Carol Ann Duffy, Penelope Shuttle and Carol Satyamurthy. Then we have Martian and Gorgon poets represented by 2 main poets, Rain and Reed. And lastly, we have next gen poets and ethnic poets. We have one example for each, Simon Armitage and Benjamin Zephaniah. Let us see the historical and literary context for this late 20th century and early 21st century British poetry. This has its roots in this dissolution of the British Empire and the establishment of the Commonwealth of Nations in 1949. After this, we have the Queen Elizabeth II reigning from 1951. We also have to remember that women were able to get voting rights sometime before, but then voting rights for adults above the age of 18 were granted at this time. Then after repeated attempts, Britain became a member of the European Union in 1973. Ironically, the same repeated attempts reflected in the Brexit in 2016 and 2020. The Conservative Party was led by Margaret Thatcher in 1979, and immediately after this we have the Labour Party led by Tony Blair. And during this Blair government, we have this devolution of powers for Scotland, Wales and Ireland. That means regional aspirations were becoming stronger and stronger, and in this kind of political and social climate, we have poetry in various forms like anti-modernism, post-modernism and globalism. We have some group of people like angry young men and women movements in this period. So, individual aspirations, ethnic aspirations, regional aspirations, as we have in politics, we also have in poetry. Let us see this map of United Kingdom. We need to understand the different regional aspects so that we can understand the voices from different locations. What we see in green is this mainland that is Britain, and what we see in orange color is Wales, then we have yellow color for Scotland, and then we have something like between yellow and orange above Ireland, that is Northern Ireland. So, these areas represent different regions of the United Kingdom, and we also have separately Ireland. When we come to Irish poetry, we will see that this Northern Ireland and Ireland, they come together, but then after independence of Ireland in 1922, we have Northern Ireland separately, which is still with the mainland, that is Britain, but Ireland is separate. Let us begin with movement poets. After this modernism, after the First World War and the Second World War, this kind of centerless or chaotic experience of life, we have a group of poets called movement poets, and this movement poets represented a reactionary movement against the cultural pretensions of Bohemia and Bloomsbury group. Some elitist people interested in one way of life, thinking that they represent the mass of people, that is what these poets were against. The aim of achieving diction and fidelity to mundane experience was the key to understand movement poets. They also used an accessible native idiom. Some of the members of this movement include Donald Davy, D.J. Enright, Elizabeth Jennings, Robert Conquest, Kingsley Amis, one of the well known novelists, and again we have another novelist, John Wayne, who wrote poems along with these movement poets. They had one anthology called New Lines, which was published in 1956. The whole movement was led primarily by Philip Larkin. He was a librarian by profession, but he wrote some excellent poetry during this period. He was a self-effacing man. He was influenced by Yeats and Hardy. So, we can see modernist reacting against Victorian poetry or Edwardian or Georgian poetry. We can find that kind of influence in Philip Larkin, who took the interest in Yeats, the latter Yeats, and also this Hardy. These two were more lyrical, more romantic, and this kind of lyrical romantic aspects were imbibed by Philip Larkin and other movement poets. Philip Larkin published two of his well known poems during this period. One is called The Wits and Wendings and other one is called High Windows, published in 1974. We have a sample poem from Larkin. This is called The Trees. It is a 12-line 3-stanza nature poem. It is about nature. We have the first two stanzas here. The trees are coming into leaf like something almost being said. The reason buds relax and spread, their greenness is a kind of grief. Is it that they are born again and we grow old? No, they die too. Their yearly trick of looking new is written down in rings of grain. Obviously, this is a poem about trees, leaves, and the falling of leaves and renewal of the season, rejuvenation of life, but then we can see their greenness is a kind of grief, and there is always a kind of movement from life to death. That is why this kind of poem is very important for us to understand that life and death is all about a cycle. We just participate in this cycle of life and death. Then we have another group of poets called Alvarez group of poets, and they published one anthology called New Poetry. It was edited by Alfred Alvarez and published by Penguin in 1962. This anthology recorded the challenges of British poetry at this time. Alvarez wrote an introduction to this group of poems and said that what was happening in the poetry scenario at that time was not good enough for British culture, British poetry. He used that expression beyond gentility principle in his introduction. There was an attempt to move away from this gentility, that is this Bloomsbury group and all that. Now, this is considered to be a corrective to the academic, polished and polite words of the movement poets like Larkin. So, we can say that this group of poets reacted against movement poets and also the modernist poets. We have some representations here like Horace Thomas, Norman Mackay, Christopher Middleton, Ted Hughes, David Holbrook, Robert Lowell and John Berryman. The last two poets, Robert Lowell and John Berryman, are in fact Americans. By introducing some American poets, Alvarez wanted the British community to understand that there is something more to be done radically, experimentally in British culture. This group of poetry is also linked with Geoffrey Hill, Francis Bury and John Silkin. And when Alvarez edited the volume second time in 1965 in an expanded volume, he also included Sylvia Plath, Peter Porter and Ian Hamilton. This volume is an indication of the variety of themes and experimental forms that British poets practiced during this time, that is in the 1960s. We have an example from Ted Hughes' well known poem The Thoughtfox. It is a 24 line 6 stanza poem on poetic creativity itself. I imagine this midnight moment's forest, something else is alive beside the clock's loneliness and this blank page where my fingers move. We have some gaps, that is the first stanza and we are now moving to the last stanza. Till with a sudden sharp hard stink of fox it enters a dark hole of the head. The window is starless still, the clock ticks, the page is printed. We have underlined some letters, we have also highlighted some parts of words and some words to indicate that this kind of experimental poem is full of poetic qualities. Particularly we can see the alliteration, we can see the repetition of words in, we can see the assonance in night and alive, alliteration in midnight moment and also sudden sharp stink, and further we can see starless still, again one more clock tick and finally we can see page printed. It is an experimental poem but using certain qualities which are essential for poetry. That is why some of these experimental poems, at least a few like Ted Hughes, they are still popular today. We have another representation from Wales by R.S. Thomas. This poem is called Wells Landscape. We should not neglect one part of England, that is why we have this example from R.S. Thomas. We earlier looked at Dylan Thomas as a poet from Wales and now for this group we have R.S. Thomas. He was a priest and poet and he has his poem, it is well known. It is a 29 line poem, it was published in 1955 for the first time. We have just two stanzas here. To live in Wales is to be conscious at dusk of the spilled blood that went to the making of the wild sky, dyeing the immaculate rivers in all their courses. There is no present in Wales and no future, there is only the past, brittle with relics, wind bitten towers and castles. Obviously this poem from Wales talks about one kind of attitude, atmosphere in the landscape, that is there is only the past, no present, no future. That is a kind of atmosphere that R.S. Thomas was able to capture during this time about Wales. Even today Wales is not that much prominent as Scottish or Irish poetry. We have one more group of poets called Hobsbaum group of poets. This is again reaction against the movement poets. A group of poets casually met in London from 1955 to 1965, that is almost a decade. They followed the principles of F.R. Lewis from his close reading, scrutiny and rational discussion, elocution, and also they were thinking more about the poetry's civic role. They believed that poetry had some civic role and they had to do it by themselves. This group of people met under the leadership of Philip Hobsbaum and Edward Lucy Smith. They published a volume called A Group Anthology, edited by Lucy Smith and Hobsbaum and published in 1963. Some of the members of this group include George Macbeth, Edward Lucy Smith, Peter Redgrove, Alan Brown John, Peter Porter, Martin Bell, Flor Adcock and B.S. Johnson. In their meetings they used to discuss some poems before they were published. Some of the poems which were discussed like this are given here: Porter's The Pilgrimage, Macbeth's Poem in a Meter of Ernest Dowson, and lastly Redgrove's The Archaeologist. Such discussions are found in an essay. We have one popular group of poets called Liverpool Poets. It is a term that refers to a group of 3 poets, particularly Roger McGough, Brian Patten and Adrian Henry. They were more into music and poetry coming together. They were influenced by the Beatles, rock music and jazz. Remember, we mentioned about the influence of American poetry in Alvarez's anthology. We also have another group of poets called Black Mountain Poets. We have the Beat Generation. Such poets influenced poets all over the world, in Canada, in Australia, including India. We have such influences, and here specifically these 3 poets came together, performed their poems along with music, and they published poems together as a collective in 3 volumes, and then they were also publishing poems individually of their own poems. So, such anthologies are here: the Mercy Sound, the Liverpool Scene and the New Volume. They had huge impact on the cultural scene in Britain, removing the difference between popular poetry and high poetry. They presented a popular, urban, anti-academic, good-humoured and vocal poetry to the large audience. They considered poetry a performance art medium for public rather than a private medium of consumption. Now let us come to this Scottish Makars. As we mentioned earlier, a mucker is a maker. They wanted to use this Scottish term specifically, that is why we have retained that word mucker here. Makar is a maker, a poet laureate of Scotland since 2004. We also have city makers for the cities of Edinburgh, Glasgow, Stirling, Aberdeen and Dundee. These are located in Scotland. Some of the key facets of Scottish group of poets are their land and language and people. Often they write about themselves. We have some examples here. Edwin Morgan, he was a mucker from 2004 to 2011, and then Liz Lockhead from 2011 to 2016, and lastly we have Jackie Kay from 2016. These 3 poets are muckers for the whole province, whereas we have some poets specifically only for cities. Some other Scottish poets are Douglas Dunn, Robert Crawford and Carol Ann Duffy, another poet laureate of England from 2009 to 2019, the first woman poet, the first Scottish poet, the first lesbian to be the poet laureate of England is Carol Ann Duffy. This Robert Crawford, Carol Ann Duffy also come under another category called New Gen poets, but we have grouped them under Scottish regional poetry here. Let us have an example from Douglas Dunn's poem called 13 Steps and the 13th of March. It is a 52 line section of the long poem called Elegies by Dunn. We have just 2 stanzas here. And visitors 3, 4, 5 times a day, my wept exhaustions over plates and cups drain my self-pity in these days of grief. Before the grief, flowers and no vases left, tea, sherry, biscuits, cake and whiskey for the week. She fought death with an understated mischief. I suppose I will have to make an effort, turning down painkillers for lucidity. Dunn's first wife died of cancer. At this time he wrote this poem for her as an elegy. It is a very powerful poignant poem sharing his grief for his dead wife. We have a large number of poets in this group called Irish poets, and we specifically refer to Northern Ireland. 1 or 2 poets may be from Ireland, but then we have brought them together. Often they are discussed as Irish poets. Interestingly, the best poetry of the post 1950 Britain came from the Irish poets with an awareness of their troubled history. The troubled history refers to the conflicts between Irish people and the government of Britain. Always some kind of conflict or the armed conflicts. Seamus Heaney distinguished himself with a Nobel Prize for Poetry in 1995, and we have another poet called Michael Longley, who also garnered several awards and recognitions for his poetry. Evan Boland is a notable Irish poet from Ireland. Others include Kieran Carson, Tom Paulin, Derek Mahan, Paul Muldoon, Med McGuckian, Piers Hutchinson, Paul Durcan, Michael Davitt. All these poets describe traditional rural and literary landscapes of Ireland. They additionally deal with urban working class issues, and when they focused on this Irish land, people, culture, everything together, they were able to write very powerful poetry, and which was much more powerful than poetry from England or any other place. We have an example from Michael Longley here. This poem is called Ghetto. It is an irregular 8 stanza poem published in 1991. Because you will suffer soon and die, your choices are neither right nor wrong. A spoon will feed you, a flannel keep you clean, a toothbrush bring you back to your bathroom's view of chimney pots and gardens. Then we have an inventory of many items listed, and then we have these 3 lines. These are your heirlooms, perishables, worldly goods. What you bring is the same as what you leave behind. Your last belonging, a list of your belongings. Ghetto refers to these Jewish ghettos, people moving from one place to another, taking their belongings, and in order not to forget, they have a list of belongings, and then what is left finally is this list of belongings. It is again a powerful poem about the Holocaust, the suffering of millions of people. Now we come to the interesting part of our contemporary British poetry, which is full of women poets. That is why women's poetry in England is very rich and multifarious. We have different regions and backgrounds focused on women's issues: revision, freedom, justice, earth, sexuality. These poets have discussed these issues in wide ranging perspectives. We have some English poets represented by Carol Satyamurthy, Jenny Joseph, Anne Stevenson, Penelope Shuttle, U.A. Fanthorpe, Wendy Cope, Stevie Smith, Carol Rumens, Linda France, Ellen Feinstein, Selima Hill, Ruth Padel, Helen Dunmore, Vicky Fever, Joe Shapcott. Linda France has recently won the Chumley Award in 2020. That is why we have highlighted her. We have some Scottish poets in Kathleen Jamie, Jackie Kay, Carol Ann Duffy, and Maura Dooley. Then women poets are found in Wales as well. We have some examples like Darren Rees Jones, Gillian Clark, and Gwyneth Lewis. And again we have some poets from Northern Ireland in Kate Newman, Med McGuckian, Lentia Flynn, Sinead Modesty, and Colette Bryce. Women poets in late 20th century or early 21st century are very powerful. We have a large number of poets and they deal with different kinds of themes: violence, beauty as commodity culture, domestic chores, eccentricity, globe-trotting. That means people move from one place to another, they do not live in the same place. Many of these women poets have work experience in America or in other European countries or elsewhere. They just come and go and keep on moving. That is why this globe-trotting we have mentioned here. A recovery of women's skin, body, gender, motherhood, dreams and longings, anti-war, pro-climate, foul media, and identity, and other themes. We have women poets focusing on a wide variety of techniques as well. They play on impropriety, delinquency, incongruity, irony, sophistry, shifting of images from reproduction to production, transition from maternity to effectivity, that is efficiency, how much effectively they can work in various fields. And we have one example from Carol Satyamurthy's poem called Our Story. Let us now praise women, but awkward women, tenacious with truth, whose elbows disposed of the impossible, who split seams, who wouldn't wait, take no, take sedatives. It's again a very powerful poem. I just came across Carol Satyamurthy's poem in one place. Ever since I have taken a liking to her poems, they are very powerful. We have another group of poets called Martian and Gorgon poets, primarily two poets. Some others are also associated with this group of poets. This is again a post 1950 poetry which attempted new ways of seeing with several groups of poets. Martian and Gorgon poets brought a fresh air into poetry at this time. Craig Raine has redefined the English vocabulary in his poem called A Martian Sends a Postcard Home, published in 1979, and became a very popular poet. What he did was to call books flying caxtons perching on hands. Then we have another poet called Tony Harrison, who emphasized the need for deep brainwashing in his long poem called The Gaze of the Gorgon. Deep brainwashing is similar to what we have in criticism, defamiliarization. They are polemical poets who explore social issues of class, violence and language very seriously. We have two other poets, Christopher Reid and James Fenton. They are also associated with Raine and Harrison in their technical experiments and poetic possibilities. We have an extract from A Martian Sends a Postcard Home. This is a 34-line poem on naming things anew in couplets. Caxton, you may remember, who was the first one to bring printing to England. Caxtons are mechanical birds with many wings, and some are treasured for their markings. They cause the eyes to melt or the body to shake without pain. I have never seen one fly, but sometimes they perch on the hand. Caxtons, that means books or mechanical birds with many wings. When we turn the leaves, they have many wings, and some are treasured for their markings. We have markings on pages. So he describes books in a quite new way for us and expands our perception. We have the last group of poets called New Gen and Ethnic Poets. We have new generation poets who have very powerful voices, unlike all the previous groups of poets we have looked at. These poets have moved from the margin to the center within England and also from outside. That is, different pockets of England, they sent poets to London, or they are able to operate in different locations away from London, that is the center of British society. We have some examples in Simon Armitage, a poet from Yorkshire who is the current poet laureate. Glyn Maxwell from Welsh origin has many voices and forms. Then we have Robert Crawford, a poet from Scotland. He is a major poet and also an anthologist. Then we move on to this ethnic group of poets. These are represented by Benjamin Zephaniah. He is of Jamaican British origin and he writes anti-empire poems in a volume called Wicked World. We have John Aggard, a Guyanese British poet. He has written a volume called Travel Light, Travel Dark. And one more poet we have, Grace Nichols. She is also from Guyana, that is why she has Guyanese British origin, and she has a volume called Picasso, I Want My Face Back. Benjamin Zephaniah is a very powerful poet who was offered this poet laureateship and also this order of British Empire, but he refused, he rejected them, saying, I do not like that word empire. And these poets continue to express themselves. They represent the voices of many kinds of people from various parts of the world living in England. We have a poem from Glyn Maxwell, Letters to Edward Thomas for Derek Walcott. Just some extracts we have. It is a poem written in the form of a letter. So it reads like this: Dear Edward Thomas, frost died, I was born. I am a father and you like the names we gave our girl. I am writing this at dawn where Robert lived in Amherst, and your poems I keep by his house brick to your tile. Perhaps I'll guess which one will ask me what they always ask. Whom do I write for? Anybody? Yes, you. Edward Thomas is an early 20th century British poet. Edward Thomas and Robert Frost were friends. We have already seen that. And here we have a poet at the end of 20th century writing to Edward Thomas in America, that is Amherst. And the whole question is, whom do I write for? Who is your audience? When Chaucer wrote his poems, he was convinced that he would have only a limited number of audience from the court. Later on, the audience for poetry in Britain increased or expanded, and today in 21st century we have audience for poetry in different parts of the world, and some poets write for certain specific audience like their own mentors or those poets who influenced them. To summarize our introduction to contemporary British poetry, let us see these points. We looked at English poetry in the late 20th and early 21st century. We referred to the various regions of United Kingdom, British mainland, Scottish land, Welsh land, Irish land, particularly Northern Ireland, and also poets from different ethnic backgrounds. We saw a number of poets belonging to various groups, movement poets as we saw in Larkin, Enright and Jennings, Alvarez group of poets we saw in Gunn, Hughes and Hill, Hobsbaum group of poets we found in Redgrove and Brown Johnson. A very interesting group of poets we saw in Liverpool Poets, who like McGow, Patton and Henry really popularized poetry through their performances. We also looked at Scottish Makars in the form of Edwin Morgan and Douglas Dunn. Then we examine Irish poets represented by Heaney, Muldoon, Longley, with their attachment to their land, culture, people. And the most interesting group of poets we have seen is this women poets represented by Duffy, Shuttle and Satyamurthy. We have a very experimental group, almost postmodernist group in Martian poets, Rain and Reed. And lastly we saw this next gen and ethnic poets in Armitage and Zephaniah. We started with this modernist group of poets in Britain in our previous lecture, and we now saw this anti-modernist poets. We also have postmodernist poets and globalist poets. There is no specific ism in this case. These poets belong to different backgrounds, different languages, different lands, different experiences, and there is no one ism that they belong to. Geographically they belong to one group, by language they belong to another group, by immigration they belong to another group, by experience of their own travel and all that they have different identities, multiple identities, multiple issues they have, but all of them deal with contemporary issues of representation of human beings, their dignity, their life, nature, environment, everything they deal with. We have some references here for you. You can read some of these references. I referred to one essay by Hobsbaum, it is not mentioned here. If you look for Philip Hobsbaum, you will find the article and see how he has written about the experiment or informal meeting that he conducted. Hope you will find some references and pursue your interest in British poetry. Thank you.